Hey, it's my aircraft! Hey friends, today I'm in a 737 flying a long straight-in ILS approach. More specifically, ILS 27 left in Chicago O'Hare. Here I'm intercepting the final at about 40 miles out. Pilots in the US know this approach fairly well, and the biggest challenge here is speed management. Air traffic controllers give pilots speed assignments that must be complied with expeditiously. Because if you don't, they'll say, it's not gonna work out, and they'll put you right in the back of the line. As usual on my channel, you get 100% manual flying. No cheating with the autopilot whatsoever. Alright, so a typical assignment at this point is to maintain 10,000 feet and 300 knots. Fast forward a little bit, and the next thing you'll hear is cross Grable at or above 7,000 feet, cleared ILS approach runway 27 left, maintain 250 knots. First thing, I select 7,000 feet initially, then cut the throttles to bring thrust to idle, and extend speed brakes. Remember, I must not hesitate with speed assignments. My next challenge is to maintain level flight until I slow down to 250 knots. This requires aggressive nose-up trimming. Now, with every second that I'm not descending, I'm deviating more and more above the normal 3-degree descent profile. You can see how my vertical deviation is increasing fast, exceeding 2,000 feet above the glide path. But not to worry, it's expected. In fact, I'll stay above the profile all the way until the final approach fix, and I'll be perfectly fine and stable in the end. My thrust will remain at idle until then also, and so it's all going to be about managing my energy with the flight controls, which is so cool. So I'm descending with the best rate I can get while pitching down for 250 knots while having all the boards out. It appears I'll be crossing Grable intersection at or around 9,000 feet, which is totally fine. Remember, the clearance said cross it at 7,000 feet or higher. Next thing I'm gonna do is select 2,200 feet in the altitude preselect on MCP. That's the minimum altitude to cross TAF's intersection, the final approach fix. We'll talk about it more when we get closer. So now the controller is telling me to maintain 210 knots. I know that this will kill my descent rate and will prevent me from catching up with my profile. But as I mentioned before, speed compliance is paramount here, so I'm pitching up to slow down. The thrust is still idle, and the speed brakes are still out. Look at that beautiful Chicago City skyline. It's the Loop, Chicago's name for downtown. The tallest skyscraper is the Willis Tower, and the tall black building on the right is the Hancock Tower. The airport in the background is Midway. It's one of the major hubs for Southwest Airlines. Alright, let's throw in some slats and flaps. Well, I technically don't need them for increased lift yet. They will help me to increase my descent rate at a slower speed. I select flaps 1 and then go straight to flaps 5. The slats that are closer to the fuselage will extend fully, and the slats on the other side of the engine will extend partially for now. Here's 210 knots, diving down to maintain the speed while trying to catch up with the glide slope. So I have a minute to explain why I'm showing you this. This is something I see often when I watch simmers fly. So what happens is pilots will catch the glide slope with the autopilot, will lock into it mentally, and then try to shed the speed. And that just won't happen easily on a 3-degree glide slope, especially if you're fast and clean, meaning no flaps out yet. So you may have to leave the glide slope and reduce the descent rate to slow down effectively. Now what's the best way to do it? Turn off the damn autopilot, which is almost a mental barrier for many. But don't feel bad, many real-life pilots have the same problem too. Alright, so now they're telling me to maintain 180 knots until TAF's, the final approach fix. So that's gonna kill my descent rate again for the third time. I'm gonna need more flaps. Speed check below 210, flaps 10. Flaps 10 will give me additional slats on the outer side of the wing, and of course 10 degrees of trailing edge flaps, which adds drag. So again, additional flaps will help me with descent rate now that I'm slower. Now, a good question you may ask here, why don't I drop the landing gear? Good question indeed, so let me explain. The extended landing gear will add drag and increase my descent rate, true. But I'm far enough that I don't need all that extra drag just yet. Look, I'm 11 miles DME from the runway. If I were to extend the landing gear now, I would catch up with the profile early and I would have to add all this extra thrust that I would need otherwise. It's actually quite embarrassing to extend the landing gear early for additional drag and then ending up not needing it. In many airports, especially in Europe, this would actually be prohibited by the noise abatement procedures. So if you enjoy simulation realism, you might as well add this little detail to your book of tricks. So, 3 miles outside TAF's, still high, gear down. Flaps 15. Descending nicely, catching up, another 500 feet to go. Got the landing clearance, runway turn off lights on, and taxi lights on. Next thing I'm going to do is set the missed approach altitude to 4,000 feet. If I had autopilot on, I wouldn't have done it just yet. I would have to wait until the glide slope intercept. But since all my automation is off, I can set bugs whenever I want. They don't command anything without the autopilot. Alright, so the glide slope is starting to show up from below. 300 feet plus deviation and counting down. Maintaining 180 knots until taps, another mile or so to go. Couple knots slow, not a big deal. After passing the final approach fix, I can do whatever I want with my speed. ATC cannot assign speeds beyond that point. The moving map is showing I'm right on track, and the glide slope is indicating that I'm right on vertical profile. An impressive flyby of the TAF's camera to confirm the accuracy of my position. And flaps 25. Speed check below 175, flaps 30, slowing down to the approach. I'm choosing to land with flaps 40 today because the runway is not very long and the winds are calm, which will result in a higher ground speed. Speed check below 162, flaps 40. And look at that, 1300 feet AGL, fully stable. How about landing checklist? Landing checklist, landing gear down. Flaps 40 and green. Speed brake, arm. Engine start switches. Continues. Landing checklist complete. Alright, 4,000 feet set for missed approach altitude. Landing clearance received. By the way, in the US in general and in Chicago especially, you get landing clearance early on. So it becomes your responsibility not to land on top of anyone. Inside 1,000 feet, looking pretty good. Notice I selected the approach speed of 147 knots. My VREF speed for flaps 40 is 142. It's customary to give yourself another 5 knots for extra protection above VREF, but VREF itself is a minimum regulatory speed on the approach. It already has plenty of safety margins built into it. So because it's such a nice day in Chicago and the winds are calm, I'm actually going to fly the VREF speed rather than V-approach. This will reduce my ground speed by another 5 knots, which will help to slow down the flare and reduce the rollout distance. Thrust levers to idle, 20 feet. Start looking at the end of the runway and flare. Spoilers deployed. Reverse screen. Auto brake on. $80. $60. Yeah, looks like I'm not gonna make the first high-speed turn off. I'm going to assume I have the authorization to vacate via the intersecting runway 4 left. Alright, a couple of words to say in conclusion. Obviously, you'll never experience traffic pressures in the sim environment as real pilots do on the line. And the ILS approach to runway 27 left in Chicago is a good example of how it happens in the real world. However, even without those pressures, you may find yourself flying high on approach and not knowing what to do. So now you know. Turn off the autopilot and the auto throttles. Pitch up to slow down and dirty up first, meaning extend whatever makes sense to extend at the time. And then with all the extra drag, you should catch up with the glide slope and eventually be stable, no problem. Good practice for your hand flying skills anyway. So thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe as you deplane. And oh yeah, if you like train spotting too, there's a freight train crossing a short final in the end as a bonus.